if you just have that little bit of an angle that relates to something that's really newsworthy, then you've just got a ton of free traffic.
Welcome to the Disruptware podcast. Whether you're just starting up or scaling your software business, we interview the experts with ideas and strategies you can implement today. Now here's your host, Paul Clifford.
Hi there, software entrepreneurs, and welcome to the Disruptware podcast. This is the show for entrepreneurs who are either just starting out or those who already have a software company and are looking for techniques and ideas for massively scaling their business. And the way we do that is to interview experts in the market who are already running their software company. And whatever level they are at, they have great content to share, and we dig deep to get factual experiences that you can put into action right now. So on today's show, we've got Robert Burns, who's the founder and CEO of a company called prReach. And prReach is a highly successful online press release company. Not only do they publish and syndicate press releases to tier one syndication networks. So in other words, those are your like Associated Press. What they've also done is added more of a twist to each press release so that it gets the social mention and the social views as well. And coupled with that, they actually create like a news anchor style video release of your press release. So all that's encaptured into one amazing package, and it's something that you can take advantage of and get some free traffic to your site, especially at launch time. But not only that, ongoing, whenever a new feature comes out, or if you have some sort of angle that you want to promote, then that's the time to publish a press release and get some traffic. So without further ado, let's get Rob onto the show.
Hey, how you doing?
Yeah, I'm great. Thanks. Great. I really appreciate you coming on board. I really wanted to get you on the show because, as you know, Disruptware is all about software, and building like really awesome software apps and SaaS products. But, the biggest issue with a lot of these, or a lot of my customers and followers of the podcast is obviously getting traffic and converting that traffic. And something that, you are an expert in, especially from a free traffic perspective. prReach, is very much a groundbreaking, press release service. I called it like PR web on steroids. And, that's pretty much what it is, right? Give me your view, your elevator pitch of what it is.
Sure. So, yeah, when we decided to launch prReach, really what I was looking for was, kind of a vulnerability in the market. I wanted to go out there and I wanted to look at something that would not just be, because I've been doing internet marketing and SEO probably for the last 12 or 14 years. And, you see a lot of folks where they'll just kind of come out with this product or this software thing, and it's a bit gimmicky, and and it's just really more of a hustle, and they'll make a bunch of money, and then, it either doesn't work or whatever. And or the industry changes and then it's just gone and they disappear. And so I wanted something that would actually be a real business, but there's a kind of a vulnerability in the market where maybe they've just been static for too long, which actually was the case with the PR companies. And that's really what kind of prompted me to launch prReach. And I look at PR as far as online digital press releases, really kind of like publishing, where, publishers for the longest time, they had a 17th century marketing model where they would just dictate to the customers how, they would be published. And, with the advent of the internet and how things have really kind of grown and evolved, now people choose, how they're going to market themselves and how they're going to market their products and their books. And really the publishing industry just got completely passed by. Just like kind of the record industry, same thing, where, they had this model where they said, this is how things are going to be done. And they didn't really want to change with the times, and they just disappeared. With press releases, it's been, I think a lot of the, technology is just so embedded and it's so old that it's really hard for them, some of the other companies to really be flexible and really grow with how the internet has changed things. And so when I came out with prReach, we just looked at, what else can we add? What can we make this so that this is a 21st century product and how can we build our platform so that it's flexible enough? If things don't work, then we can get rid of them. And if we need to add new things, that we can. And that was really my whole game plan behind prReach. And that's what we did. So we, a couple of things that separated us that makes us a little bit different is we have a huge social media component where we actually, when you publish, not only does it go out to, tier one syndication, which means, like Associated Press and LexisNexis and Reuters and, all the things that the big companies send to, we also have our own social media network that will the press releases will actually go out to, which is huge because 90% of the journalists are actually use things like Twitter, believe it or not, when they're doing their news. I mean, people, journalists will either follow Twitter to see what's going on. A lot of the third world countries, if there's something happening there, then usually it's going to pop up on Twitter before anywhere else, or a YouTube video or something like that. So so we have this huge social media component, and then we also which is completely different than every press release company is we actually have a video press release. So we have a newsroom with an anchor person that will actually read off your press release and then embed that video in your press release. So every press release company in the world, when you send out a press release it's basically you talking about your stuff. Where with ours, we actually have somebody else that is talking about you. So it gives you that much more credibility, and psychologically, it gives you a bit of an advantage. So,
yeah, I mean, it's just like someone reading the news. It's like
exactly. We don't try to be fake news. I mean, we don't try to fake somebody out and have like a fake Walter Cronkite or something in there. And
sure.
But it is news, so we call it a video news release. So it's just a news person reading it, and so people can also take those videos and embed them on their website, so it adds credibility to whatever business you might have.
I mean, so that's brilliant, because basically, so let's take myself, I got a press release, so I come to you with that release, and you not only publish that, and push that out to, the big syndicated news networks. So like you said, exactly. Associated Press and everything like that. But you also push that out all to the social media world. But then you also create, the video. So you got the real media view, of your news as well.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So then you've got potentially 3 different avenues for traffic. And then obviously, whatever that might pick up, and I'm guessing, links and stuff like that for SEO benefit as well.
Yeah. I mean, we don't try, I would say we're probably more SEO than most of the PR companies out there, but I don't ever really promote that. Just, there was one PR company whose name I won't mention, PR Web. who went out and said, "Hey, we're the SEO press release company," and instantly Google said, "No, you're not," and actually just disappeared them from the internet for a couple of weeks, just to prove that fact. And
that's power, isn't it? I mean, I've seen some recent
they
news.
Just left themselves completely vulnerable. So,
I mean,
I believe there's absolutely huge SEO benefit in there. I just don't really outwardly promote it as much as most folks would, just because I'm in it for the long run, and SEO is one of the benefits, but it's not the only benefit, and I wouldn't put all my eggs in the SEO basket. So
yeah, so that, I mean, but just take one step back a second on that point. I mean, that's power. It's and I saw a recent news article about Google again, being too monopolistic, whether deliberate or not. But the fact is, they are such a giant. And at a push of the button, they could just switch off your business from a traffic perspective, just for the hell of it. I mean, admittedly, obviously, from their perspective, their argument would be, well, you're just playing the system. But, in PR Web's case, they've always known that press releases, attract links and stuff like that. And they do have big SEO benefits. So to suddenly turn around to that company and just say, hey, but no, stop doing that, and here's your punishment for a couple of weeks.
Right. And that's, and then they made them kind of scramble around and to be, more Google compliant. And so one of the things that really upset a lot of folks was they just started deleting, press releases that Google said, oh, these press releases shouldn't be on this site. and they just deleted them. These were ones that people paid for, and then they just didn't get reimbursed. And so there was really some unhappy folks, going on with that. And again, to me, it's just, you really need to, you need to look at the bigger picture. I mean, that's a $35 million company, and they're doing, they're doing a silly biz op play, and, they got bit for it. So, that's what I don't want to do. So.
Yeah. There's like two lessons out of that. There's the fact is that one thing I say to people is that, never build a business that's reliant on another business. Okay. So never, I see a lot of people building Facebook communities, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. Yep. But if you're building that as your core business, so in other words, if you're selling access to your Facebook community and you're really working on that as your primary business, then that's a mistake, because your whole business is reliant on the Facebook platform being available and your account being open and stuff like that. It's the same with Google Plus, communities, everything else. If you're going to build anything, make sure it's on your own property. Yeah, so on your own site, on your own servers. And secondly, especially when it comes to companies like Google, never do anything for SEO value, always do it for traffic value. And if you focus on, the traffic and writing content for real readers and real visits, then, the SEO benefits just kind of come automatically, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And that's one of the things that was really, even when I was in the thick of it as far as doing SEO work, people would always write copy for search engines, and it just didn't convert. I mean, it wasn't engaging, and if people went to the site, then it's really unless they're just doing some kind of cloaking or something where there's copy written for search engines and then there's copy written for readers. It just it was just a terrible strategy. So I've always said your clients and your content are first. And then, anything around that, because that's your strategy, and anything around that is a tactic. So, I think the big challenge is most folks, especially in the internet marketing world, is they just don't realize, what a big wide world it is out there. And they focus on their one little thing, their one little tactic, and, they make a business out of it. And then when that changes, and it just, then they're just decimated, and then they have to start all over again. And it's just kind of a tough thing. I mean, and everything's vulnerable. I mean, everything eventually changes, and businesses change and industries change. But, especially when you base on these little micro type businesses that, they could make a lot of money in a beginning, but, they always disappear. I mean, now Hangouts are the big thing, and I use Hangouts and I leverage them to death, but I would not build my business on a Hangout. Just like with prReach, in the beginning, our videos were YouTube videos. And I really started kind of getting that feeling like, this is kind of a vulnerability, because if YouTube decides to, who knows, maybe they'd go to a paid model, or they do some kind of crazy thing, or they change their terms or whatever, then, my whole business is gone. And so I actually started migrating over to other platforms that I own, where I actually own the videos. And it was a good thing, because there was some guy that was an affiliate marketer that was using my press releases, and he started ViewBot spamming my YouTube channel so that his videos would rank, and eventually got that channel banned. So it's a perfect example of where I could have just because I was relying heavily on the, another company and another source, then I could have lost my whole business. But by then I'd already had everything. I just flipped a switch, and I already had them, on other channels. And it took me 30 minutes to move everything over, because I was already prepared for it. So
cool. So Rob, let me ask you, for, I've got all these people on my tribe, who are launching software products or scaling or whatever. And so they're going to be thinking, right, now I need to get a press release out there. I need to get my news out there. Should they just do one, when they launch? Should they do like one a month? What sort of angles can people take, when they're putting out press releases?
Right. And that's a good question. That's probably one of my biggest questions. I actually, if you go to my site, when you go to the blog section, there's a little pop-up. And you can opt in and get it's 108 reasons to write a press release, because one of my biggest questions is, one is how to write a press release, and the other is, what reasons do I have to write a press release? with software folks, there's there's a lot of some angles you might be able to take is, of course there's a launch, so you can announce the launch. If it's some kind of disruptive technology that might change the industry, then you can talk about that. You can also look. There's something it's called newsjacking, where you can actually go to Google News and type in some phrases or sentences that are related to your product or your industry or your business, and you can see what's going on in the news. And so then you can actually do press releases where you're the expert commenting on that particular thing. So, maybe something happened with Oracle or some database software that you might be tied into that's tied into your software, something like that. SQL or whatever, and there's some kind of industry change, and you could say, now you could be an industry expert and quote on that. So
depending, obviously, with your targeting, that demographic, right. But you're right. That's a great point. So, you kind of look at what your market might be reading and what's newsworthy, and then you kind of piggyback. You find something that's really, really trending, and then piggyback on that and sort of tie into that story.
Right.
Yeah, because I guess also because other journalists are monitoring that as well. Yeah, so whatever the buzzword or hashtag is, they're monitoring that, so you can kind of piggyback on that and see if you get a mention, within the press. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you can, maybe there's a journalist that wrote something that's related to your industry, and then you write a press release that's commenting on it. You could send it to that journalist, and that journalist might interview you, and you're if you have a counterpoint. Or something like that. So that's that's a really good way to get actual hits from the. A lot of people think too that you just put a press release out there and you're just instantly going to journalists are just going to instantly call you, and a lot of times you really need to kind of track down the people that are the thought leaders in your industry and write a press release and kind of direct it towards them if you're looking to get on the news or the media. And it's really not that hard. My wife she just got on the news. I think it's 140 different markets. And we sent and that actually we just sent out a press release and they just hit her up. But she does so much. She does so much news, and she's in the media so much, and she has a huge media room, so that they basically can go, do a little bit of research on her and say, oh, this, she's been on Good Morning America and Oprah and all that kind of stuff. So, she knows what she's doing. So she gets, it's a lot easier for her to do that. But really, anybody can do that. Any business, you think, well, oh, my business it's not newsworthy or it's not related. But I mean, my wife's an image consultant and a professional organizer. And, when she decided she wanted to do that, I mean, I didn't even know what that was. I was doing SEO, so nobody was even looking for that because, now it's different because there's TV shows about it and, all that good kind of stuff. So it's a lot more visible, but at the time we actually kind of created a whole market around PR, and we would do press releases like, we would pitch different news sources like how spring cleaning your garage or getting organized for back to school, or how to change your image for your new job interview, things like that. And that got her on the news, which got her a lot of exposure, which got her a lot of traffic. And now she's pretty much that led to more nationally syndicated interviews, which led to her actually being keynote speakers, getting like $7,000 to $10,000 keynote gigs for speaking for Intuit and Hewlett Packard, things like that. So
right, cool.
Yeah. So it's
another thing, because we go back a couple of years, and we've met up a couple of times, and I remember the last chat that we had. And this kind of goes to my next question, but we were talking about Upworthy. And you mentioned that, as a site to look at because they get extreme sort of viral traffic, and they use a lot of tricks around the headlines and things like that.
Yeah.
So I guess, are there any particular angles that you would take, or any advice as to how people could find, an angle to get, their press release at least read. Yeah, because the worst thing that anyone wants to do is just to say, right, brand name is now launched. Okay?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, no one's interested, okay, because they're seeing that like 500 times a day.
Well, one of the biggest mistakes folks do is they write a press release, kind of, they're in their own little microcosm in their own little world, and you're writing this press release, it's kind of, which they think is, something brilliant about them, but, nobody really cares, honestly. When you write a press release, it really needs to engage the reader or the journalist, and it needs to touch on something that is a vested interest, for the reader or the journalist, where, most people write a press release based on whatever interest, the person submitting the release is. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Absolutely.
So it's not about you, basically.
Yeah.
It's about the reader and it's about the journalist. And if you write for the reader and write for the journalist, and that's what Upworthy's really good at, because their titles are just crazy engaging. And there's a PDF out there where they actually did a presentation, like how do we write our titles? And they usually write, on average, I think it's like 22 or 27 different versions of that title before they pick the one, and it's always something that's a hook. It hooks you in and brings you in. And I say probably 70% of your press release is your title and your hook, because that's what's going to show online. That's what people are going to see first. And if that's not engaging, if it's like, Dave's hot dog stand now, carries mustard, nobody's going to care, but, if they tie it into, GMO free something or other, some kind of angle that is newsworthy, then that's going to make a big difference.
Something really stupid like GMO mustard makes your hair go green.
Exactly.
Someone's going to read that, right?
Right. Yeah. And, it's got to be true, but yeah. And actually that one probably is true, but, so that's the angle that you want to do, is you want to look at a much, much bigger picture. And that's how people that are, just smaller businesses, you'd be surprised, because, people in the news are they don't have enough news for their cycle. That's why you just see the same stuff over and over again, is because they're just, they just can't find, enough stories and enough interesting things. So if you just have that little bit of an angle that relates, that's something that's really newsworthy, then you've just got a ton of free traffic and a ton of free people that are interested in the same thing that you're selling.
Because the newspaper or the media wants that as well, right? So they want the traffic for their site, so they have to publish interesting stuff. Yeah.
Think about when you write a press release, think about, how can I drive traffic to these people? How can these, because that's what they want. And that's exactly right. If they're looking for things that is going to drive traffic to their site or their channel or whatever, media source, outlet that they are, then, and if you can provide that for them, then, you pretty much own them. So.
Brilliant. So, So I need to write a press release, right? And so I need to I need to perhaps do some searching, find out what's trending, I guess, on Google Trends. Maybe look at Upworthy to try and get an idea of what sort of titles or what sort of angles to take to make my title, interesting, right?
Google News is another good source,
right?
Type in, different phrases related to your business and see what's popular. What look at those titles. Dig, Reddit, Stumble Upon, look at the top trending titles related to your business and industry, because those are if those titles aren't good, they're not going to rise to the top. Just the way that those particular social media sources are structured, then it's just not going to happen. So that's another one. Look at even Twitter. Twitter trending topics. Are any of your topics related to whatever the top trends are, and can you tie a story into those trends?
No, absolutely. And then what's the best thing then? So they, should I write my release and then sign up for one of yours and submit it? What's the best approach?
Yeah, it's pretty simple. I mean, the way we're set up is you just sign up and then we have training that'll just walk you through some unique things that we have that other press release companies don't have. You can we don't charge. If you want to add your own video, it'll actually be if you want to have a YouTube video, it's actually embedded, and you can add different documents like PDF downloads or images, kind of any kind of extra material that a journalist may want, you can add it to your press release. The other thing too is we actually have a second section where you can write a 300-word summary for the actual anchor person that reads your press release, because we found a lot of times just the way a press release is written and structured, that it doesn't necessarily become the most engaging video when somebody reads it. So how an anchor person or a news person would read it is probably different than how a press release is read. So there's a separate section where you can write that so that what the anchor person reads is a lot more engaging, and which is great, because then say you take that video, you put it on your site. Now that it is more engaging, that increases time on page, which is also a ranking factor, and it hooks you in. So,
and like if I didn't want to write the release myself, what is there some service you can recommend or anything that?
Yeah. When you sign up, I actually have some links on the thank you page that'll send you to the people that we don't offer press release writing just right now, just because it's actually kind of a conflict, because we do have tier 1 syndication, which is pretty hard to get. And if we don't put out quality press releases, then we'll get kicked out. So our editors are pretty stringent. So if we offered to write a press release and then we rejected it, it's probably going to make folks upset.
Got it.
So it's a bit of a conflict of interest. So we refer people, but they're still subject to our editorial process. And really that's in your best interest, because if it's not a good press release, you're not going to engage anybody anyway. And another good thing too, as far as writing a press release, is look at how, especially if you're targeting certain journalists or certain markets, look how articles and stories are written, and pretty much just write their story for them, because a lot of journalists are so busy. If it's well written and it's engaging and it's somewhat in their style of whether if you're going after TV, it's going to be written a little bit different for TV than it is for a newspaper. But if you kind of have that story already in the can where they can just take it and rewrite it a little bit, then you're going to get picked up a lot more also. So
got it. Brilliant. All right. So and you've got some tips and stuff on your site at prreach.com. So people can at least get the basic structure outlined, in their own head.
Right. Yeah. And then, if you go to prreach.com, just go to our blog section, and there's a bunch of articles and training and different tips and ideas. And I actually have one article on how to write a press release. And I talk a lot about how we would do SEO, which is pretty contrary to the way most folks do. Like I pretty much don't support anchor text links anymore. Especially, if you're not a full-time SEO and you're not doing this all the time because everything changes so much. One of the big Panda and Penguin things that happened when they updated was, an over anchor text penalty.
Got it. And I guess just reading ahead or thinking ahead about what you're probably going to say is that I guess like if you do one press release with your anchor text optimized for some keyword, the syndication is so massive, with your service, that you could end up with like hundreds and hundreds of
we get
links.
Sometimes 3,000 to 6,000 other sites embedding those press releases and linking back to your site. So if you're a fairly new site and you don't have that many links, and all of a sudden you have 6,000 anchor text links pointing to your site with that one word, then you're pretty much going to be shut down for a while. So and Google with their LSI, their latent semantic indexing, which is just kind of a fancy scientific word for they know the shit you're writing on your site. Their LSI is so sophisticated that really, we've actually ranked sites that were talking about a subject related to a keyword, but that keyword wasn't actually even on that site. But Google thought, that it related, it was themed that, close enough. So I don't think anchor text really even matters that much. I think the quality of the content and, writing about the subject matter will matter much more. Got it.
Brilliant. All right. Well, look, we're coming to the end of the show now, but, just tell me, obviously you're an entrepreneur like myself. And, you've come from, I know you started off in PR, I think, and then you've gone through a whole world of, SEO and free traffic, and now you have your own, press release company. What do you look to, to drive yourself forward as an entrepreneur? What, who do you follow? And any advice you can give to, any of my tribe listening, today who are building their own company, and looking for, ways to succeed and motivation and things like that. Anything you can offer there to help them?
Yeah, as far as, I've kind of thinned down as far as people I follow, or, just because, I just, I'm so subject to entrepreneur, ADHD that I've really just kind of disconnected from a lot of that stuff. I mean, books I'm reading, Trust Me, I'm Lying by Ryan Holiday is a really good one, because it really talks about how the media is being manipulated, and how easy it is for somebody to do.
Right.
And he also has one called Growth Hacker Marketing, which I'm kind of reading those side to side. Advice as far as entrepreneurs, I would say probably one of the biggest things, biggest lessons for me as far as just taking things to the next level and running businesses as opposed to hustles is look at your strategies and not your tactics. Because for the longest time, especially with SEO, I was just a tactic guy. I had all these really cool, crazy things that people go, "Oh, that's brilliant! You could do this, and this is what happens." But it's just a tactic. It's not a long game. It's not a big game. It's not a business you're building. So look at the strategies. I mean, I still love the tactics, but tactics are just part of a strategy, and it's implemented in there. So don't base your business on a tactic, base it on a strategy.
Brilliant. And I think just the takeaway, obviously there's that, but the takeaway before you were just saying when you talked about, entrepreneur ADD, which we all suffer from, is thinning out who you're listening to, so yeah. Actually you're talking about focusing, so, start unsubscribing from other people's lists and stuff, really just value the content that you're reading, thin it out, and that will obviously give you the freedom in your brain, to focus on your core business, right?
Yeah, there just comes a time when, you have to stop looking at everybody else's business and run your own business. And for me, I'm I don't know everything, and I'm always constantly learning, but, I'm at the point now where I'm dedicating myself to doing, implementing everything I've learned. And, there'll come a point where I'll probably, shift the other way and kind of go back into my learning phase, because it's just something I love. But at this game, at this kind of point in my career and business, I just need to do stuff. And there's no book that's ever going to teach you, really how to succeed, except for just actually doing it. And sometimes even failing is probably, I look at it as tuition kind of, every time I fail at something, I just don't do that anymore. And I've learned something, and it may have cost me a little bit, but in the long run, when I'm playing in a bigger, better, bigger field, then I've learned by that mistake. So that's, one of the things that, and it's pretty contrary, because I know everybody else is like, oh, you need to absorb this. And I agree to a certain extent, but I also, think, there comes a time when you just need to do stuff, and you just need to focus and get rid of all those distractions.
Absolutely. Brilliant, Rob. Listen, I really appreciate you coming on the show. And for any listeners, prReach.com is the site you need to go to. And there's loads of tips and strategies on the blog there. It tells you all about it. Plus, Rob's download, I think it's 118 different ways to write a press release. So you can go and grab that at the site, and, create one of these, really groundbreaking press releases, for a hell of a lot less than any of the competition, and 10 times more powerful, especially with the video content. So Rob, thanks very much. Really appreciate it.
Hey, Paul, thanks for having me.
If you enjoyed the show, you can get the show notes from disruptware.com. And if you are not a subscriber and you're listening to this on the iTunes store, then please visit disruptware.com and sign up. That's it for this episode. Look out for next week's show. I'm Paul Clifford, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Disruptware podcast. Check us out on the web at disruptware.com.